They believed sending motorcycle enforcers would intimidate my family into submission, but they severely misjudged who they were dealing with. 3 riders thought their presence alone could fracture our resolve. They assumed targeting my spouse would compel compliance. They failed to comprehend my background, or that they selected the wrong household for confrontation. Before we explore this further, share which country you're watching from today. Let's observe how extensively this narrative spreads. It occurred during a Thursday evening, golden light washing across Cedar Ridge Estates, when I arrived home and immediately recognized trouble. My wife Chloe stood pressed against our garden shed, her voice controlled, but her stance clearly defensive. 3 motorcycle riders had surrounded her, their leather jackets displaying club insignias, engines rumbling behind them like agitated animals. One rider leaned uncomfortably close, smirking with discolored teeth. I shut off my vehicle's ignition and exited, every fiber recalling the burden of tactical equipment I hadn't worn in years. My boots contacted the pavement, and the primary rider turned toward me. "Association business," he declared, as though that justified his presence on my property, threatening my spouse. Chloe's gaze connected with mine, courageous, but I detected the subtle reassurance. She wasn't someone who frightened easily, but 3 against 1 never represented equitable odds. "You possess 45 seconds for explanation," I stated, voice lowered, steady, the variety of tone that consistently silenced inexperienced personnel during my instruction days. The rider smirked. "Chairperson Frenza dislikes your disregard for notifications. Consider this motivational encouragement." I nearly chuckled. Brenda, our HOA's self-designated monarch, had sought conflict since I questioned her unreasonable regulations. She'd cited us for a storage shed beyond her authority, threatened penalties for lumber piles outside her jurisdiction. Now she dispatched physical presence to intimidate my wife. Their error involved assuming intimidation tactics would affect me. 2 minutes, I informed them, calmly, and you'll regret not departing immediately. The leader sneered, misinterpreting restraint for vulnerability. He flexed his knuckles and advanced closer toward Chloe. That represented his final miscalculation. If this property defense account engages you, please like and follow Winds of Thought, because the confrontation intensifies dramatically. The atmosphere transformed the instant that rider leaned nearer to Chloe. My physique reacted before conscious thought engaged, years of training resurfacing like recent memory. I seized his wrist during movement, rotated, and directed him downward onto the concrete with sufficient force to raise surrounding dust. His companions froze, uncertain whether they'd witnessed their leader incapacitated by someone holding a beverage container in his other hand. "Next, individual," I stated evenly. The second man swung wildly, an unskilled punch belonging in amateur entertainment. I evaded beneath, captured his arm, and utilized his own mass to propel him directly into the garden shed wall. The nearby birds reacted noisily, feathers dispersing. Chloe actually smiled faintly at that occurrence. The final rider hesitated, engine accelerating on his motorcycle, like perhaps intimidation would suddenly succeed where physical attempts had failed. I walked directly toward him, grasped the handlebars, and pulled forcefully. The cycle tilted sideways, trapping his leg under middle framework. He cried out, struggling uselessly as I positioned above him. "Inform your employer," I stated quietly. "Subsequent occasions requiring message delivery should utilize postal services, because if she dispatches individuals to threaten my spouse again, they won't return intact." Currently, the other 2 were scrambling, groaning, holding injuries, and pleading cessation. One actually stammered, "We didn't anticipate this situation. We assumed simple intimidation assignment." I permitted their limping departure, engine sputtering as they attempted recovering remaining dignity. Chloe approached to stand beside me, dusting soil from her clothing. 2 minutes precisely, she noted, checking her timepiece. Information traveled rapidly.
By that night, HOA chairperson Brenda appeared at my entrance, face flushed, decorative necklace shifting against her blouse, as she exclaimed about assault and property destruction. But the injured riders showed little enthusiasm for official complaints. They'd experienced sufficient humiliation, and I'd possessed complete surveillance recordings. I replayed the footage for Brenda, observing her complexion paled as she recognized her scheme had failed catastrophically. Instead of my submission, now she confronted 3 angered riders reconsidering their arrangement with her, and visual evidence connected her HOA maneuver to attempted intimidation. And I hadn't concluded. By the subsequent HOA gathering, community discussion operated at maximum capacity. People whispered about riders limping for our neighborhood, about the recordings I allegedly possessed, and about Brenda's involvement throughout. I didn't refute any statements. Actually, I brought my portable computer, connected it to the projection system, and activated playback. The room became silent. There it appeared in full high definition. 3 riders around him, one grasping toward my wife, and me neutralizing them within 2 minutes total. Beverage container remaining in my grip throughout. Audible reactions emerged when the final individual pleaded for cessation, his voice breaking across the speakers. The deciding element? I'd included audio where one rider exclaimed, "The HOA chairperson compensated us." Brenda launched from her seat, screaming, "That's manipulated recording!" But it wasn't. Half the audience documented the display with their mobile devices by that point. A neighbor stood and read directly from state legal code, criminal coercion and intimidation statutes, plus our municipality's harassment regulations. Brenda had transformed the association into her personal enforcement operation, and everyone recognized it. The riders themselves, they negotiated agreements. 2 appeared at the police station the following day, injured and humbled, testify against Brenda for reduced charges. They provided text messages, payment records, even documentation she'd authored using HOA letterhead guaranteeing compensation for intimidation services. By a week's conclusion, Brenda received legal services. Conspiracy, harassment, misappropriation of HOA funds, numerous charges. She protested about community safety while officers escorted her from a residence in restraints. Chloe and I stood on our porch, beverage in my hand again. When the patrol vehicles passed, neighbors waved, some applauded, and one even shouted, "Perhaps utilize mail delivery next occasion." The association voted a removal unanimously, and restructuring commenced that same evening. Transparency, financial oversight, and absolute prohibition against any enforcement lacking legal basis. But the most satisfying development, the identical riders who had arrived to intimidate us appeared weeks later, not in leather, but in work uniforms, inquiring if they could perform neighborhood repairs as restitution components. Humble, polite, and significantly less noisy. I simply smiled and stated, "Provided you don't threaten my spouse again, we'll coexist peacefully." Occasionally, HOA leaders believe they control the community. Brenda assumed she commanded a private army. She forgot. Certain individuals respond with greater force than she could possibly imagine. Never mistake a quiet demeanor for lack of capability. True strength reveals itself only when necessary. Some lessons are best learned through immediate consequences.